Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Tekken Talk. Today, we are recapping Tiger Uppercut 2023, talking about Hafiz Tanveer, the young Pakistani Claudio player who had a big breakout international tournament, and talking about kind of the overall meta and some of the interesting play stylistic play styles that we saw succeed at this tournament. So just so you know, full spoilers for the tournament. So if you haven't watched the tournament, I highly recommend checking out Bandai Namco Esports YouTube channel to watch the archive. And in particular, the top eight was pretty great, especially the first half of the top eight. So I recommend you do that when you can, and then come back and listen to this episode to get the recap. So this tournament was the final master event of the Tekken World Tour for 2023, and it took place in Bangkok, Thailand. So of course you had a bunch of Thai players, including Book and Pat Lors, I think, who we'll get into and talk a little bit about today as well. And this was really just a treat of a tournament. It was filled with international competition, notably most of the Pakistani players who normally struggle to travel, whether it's through visa issues or funding issues, almost always because of visa issues, were able to make it out to this tournament, meaning that the level of competition was probably the highest it's been since Evolution, or even higher than Evolution, arguably, as all the top Korean players for the most part were also there. You also had players from the Philippines, America, and Europe. So I want to start off by highlighting some of the best matches in the tournament leading up to the top eight. Low High versus Arslan Ash, though it was a 2-0, was very entertaining in the top 24. Ao Richie versus Khan and Ao Richie versus Hero Malik were just hype and exciting, partially because, one, you had some crazy ends of rounds, but two, because Ao Richie was frankly the underdog in both of these matches, and he came out on top with crowd support. And of course, watching Aleo is always a treat. The biggest kind of, I guess, upset in the whole tournament, although it's less of an upset and more of a come up, was Hafiz Tanveer beating Ni, Joka, Cherryberry Mango, and Arslan Ash, all in the same tournament. So one, he's already beating arguably the top two players in the world in Ni and Arslan Ash. Then he's beating the top European player in Joka, and he's beating Cherryberry Mango, easily one of the top five Korean players, all in his first international outing. And so I want to talk a little bit more about how he did that, and as well as some of his play style throughout the tournament. But a couple other key mentions. Pat Lors from Thailand is a Lily player, and he showed up with beating Chanel easily. I will say though, Chanel in that game did not play as kind of up to his name, in the sense that lots of missed punishes, lots of slightly jittery, not smooth movement, and it didn't seem intentional. I don't know if there was something going on with his stick or if his mind just wasn't right, but Pat Lors completely dispatched of Chanel, completely dispatched of Malik Ash, who again is another Pakistani player, as well as Hafiz Adil. So two Pakistani top players he 2-0'd with a Lily, and basically the way he did it, from what I could tell, is just super clean matchup knowledge and super clean fundamental punishment. So he basically seemed to have known every matchup to a T. So this includes not only frame data, but spacing traps with Lily, sidestep traps with Lily. Every single punish was essentially frame perfect, on point, and there wasn't anything crazy that stood out about his playstyle besides just pure, unadulterated, solid Tekken play, which I think is ultimately why he may have struggled when it got to the top 8 and top 24, where he lost against Ulsan and Arslan Ash, because to beat players like Ulsan and Arslan Ash, you basically need a little something extra to your game. But it was just an amazing performance. This is the first time I've heard of Pat Lors, but I'm sure he trains with players like Book and other top Thailand players all the time. So then heading into the top 8, it was a fairly international top 8, because we had 3 Pakistani players, 3 Korean players, and 1 European player, and of course, Pat Loris, the Thailand player. So Ayo Ritchie was the European player who had an insane run. Unfortunately, I think some of his momentum kind of died out come the top 8, but that's kind of how it goes in 2-day tournaments. We had Cherry Ray Mango, Ulsan, and Lohai on the Korean side of things. Lohai is back in full force. For those who don't know, Lohai took a hiatus for personal reasons. I don't really know the whole situation, but he was gone for a while. And similarly to Ulsan, who was gone on military service, comes back and just starts placing in top 8s and playing sharper than ever. So it's heavily, it's pretty clear that while he was gone, he was watching top level Tekken and practicing somehow, because he's not the same Lohai as when he left. He's, even better. On the Pakistani side, we have Atif Butt, who I think many predicted to win the tournament. Of course, the reigning TWT champion, who is looking very strong and looking to repeat at the Tekken World Tour Finals this January. Hafiz Taveer, who we'll talk a little bit more about, and Arslan Ash. And a quick note before moving on to, Hafiz Taveer and the overall play styles demonstrated at this tournament. Arslan Ash and Knee did not have the best showings. Yes, Arslan Ash making top 6 or top 5 is maybe, it sounds weird, but is maybe not his best showing, especially because he just didn't seem as dominant throughout the whole tournament. Of course, Knee lost early to Hafiz Taveer and then lost to Hira, who are both extremely strong players. But nonetheless, a 17th place finish for Knee, which is of course surprising. And it's unclear to me if Arslan and Knee were just a bit uninterested looking forward to the finals. I think it's easier to say that with Knee, because he never picked Fang in the tournament, as far as I know, who's typically like his serious mode pick. And then Arslan did tweet about it, but we can always take tweets or character picks as a grain of salt in terms of what their actual mindset was in the tournament. But getting into Hafiz Taveer, who I think is really the story of this tournament, not only because this is in a first international event. Not only that, in one of the hardest international events you could go to, placing 4th is just insane. But how he did it with Claudio, I think was, brilliant. So we actually talked about Hafiz Taveer in a episode in the past, and I don't remember what episode it was exactly, but I was using him as an example. This was 2 years ago at this point, and I think he was like 15 or 16, of not needing Korean backdash to be successful at Tekken. Because 2 years ago, when he was playing Atif and Arslan and doing fairly well against them, he essentially never used Korean backdash. He did it maybe once every couple of games, and his entire playstyle was just about pressing buttons at the right time, but he was also a little bit defensive. And my point was, you don't need Korean backdash to be a top player. I don't want to say I've been proven wrong, but he has certainly added a very clean backdash to his game, and he's also added aggression to his game. And it seems the combination of pulling out a Korean backdash when you need it, as well as just being a little bit more aggressive and figuring out how to use Claudio's lows, frankly, better than anyone I think we've seen, really brought him to the next level. And specifically, his wall pressure was, I think, kind of a revelation when it comes to both Claudio play and a bit of the play styles we saw at the tournament. So let me be a bit more specific. So what Hafiz Tanvir would do at the wall is essentially pressure you with some of the tightest frame trap gameplay I've ever seen. And on top of that, build in a very tight, high duck evasion mix up. So basically, what it would do is he would get you to the wall either through 1 and 2 or a combo, and he'd just do sidestep 4 or a low. But really, sidestep 4 is what was setting up the mix up. So sidestep 4, you're at +6. So at +6, he either has down forward 3, which is a mid check that's 14 frames, and it has an extension, an unsafe wall splat, and a safe high. And then he has back 3, or back 4 2, I believe, which is an 18 frame mid that's hit confirmable into a wall splat, both of which can be relatively linear, but he always had back 1 to kind of fill in that gap. So when you're at +6, the safer but less rewarding option is the down forward 3 option, which he would kind of go to in the beginning. And that's frame tight. And so then basically you had to either guess or sidestep and risk getting hit by the back 1, which happened a lot because you can't jab interrupt. Maybe you can parry depending on the character, but almost none of the characters we saw even attempted that. So then once he establishes that, he says, okay, now I can move into my back 4 because that's hit confirmable and high reward with a wall splat. So then he's just doing sidestep 4, down forward 3 or back 4 with back 1s, and it's like, okay, I'm basically stuck. What do I have to do? I have to guess about the back 4 or the sidestep 4 and introduce highs or jabs that will shut this down. So if you introduce jabs, there's 2 risks. One risk is the back 1, which can crush jabs, which is kind of a hard read on Tanvir's part, but would work out quite a lot because it's both blocking the jab and shutting down any sidestep. And note, I think back 1 is one of the best moves in the game. But then the other thing Tanvir was doing, which was just insane, was just straight up ducking at the wall. Now note, he was ducking at the wall as an attacker. On these so he had very tight frame advantage where he could do almost anything. And he would just duck. And basically that was saying to the opponent, if you try and throw out a high to ever interrupt me or ever mess me up, I'm just going to be ducking and get a wall standing punishment. And it happened quite a few times. And even if it didn't whiff, even if the opponent didn't whiff, just the mind game of, oh, wow, this person might just duck to interrupt or to evade any of my high moves. And even that, he might have been buffering low parry. So if you're going to down jab or try and go for a low, he's countering that also, all while being in the tightest of frame traps situations. So, I mean, this just destroyed everyone. I don't think anyone really countered it. I think the way Tanvir lost to a Teeth and to, let me just triple check who he lost to. So he lost to a Teeth in top 8, and then he lost to Ulsan. Was, as far as I could tell, really came down to clutch, to like these very clutch moments where either Atif or Ulsan could get a big combo, get the life lead, and kind of guess right a couple of times. But when he took Arslan to the wall, or took Cherry Berry Mango to the wall, or when he took Knee Steve to the wall, it was just over because of this sidestep four, ducking, down forward three, Claudio wall pressure that was just insane. And it was somewhat reminiscent of Ao Ritchie's wall pressure throughout the tournament, in the sense of hyper aggressive, but also throwing in dashes of defense, either duck or backing away to let the opponent hang themselves trying to get out of the corner, trying to get out of the wall. And so I think this kind of brings up two themes we saw throughout the tournament in terms of playstyle that is kind of unique to the latest meta, or I would say how the game has been evolving since Knee's 2022 EVO performance with Fang, which is basically has two unique attributes. One is highly evasive moves. So high evasion moves have become, I think, more popular in top competitive play than they ever have been. I think this started because of Arslan's Athena 1 and also Fang's up forward 2 used by Knee in Evo. And since then, we've basically seen a lot of top players from Ao Ritchie using Leo's evasiveness, from a Tiff in the grand finals using Marduk's down 1+2 to evade low highs highs, to Taveer using back 1, to Ulsan using Bob's backswing blow and roll, were basically the risk reward of doing an evasive move. I think most people have kind of decided it's pretty good, especially because if we think about what our opponent would be doing in like a traditional neutral situation, there's going to be a lot of movement based predictions. And when someone is in like range 0, the chance that they attack and that you can crush it versus the chance that your evasive move will catch other movement that they do is pretty high. So you're not only trying to evade um, an attack, but you're also catching them coming in. Potentially, you're catching them on the back on their back dash, and you're really covering quite a few bases with really evasive moves. And most of what evasive moves crush are highs, aka jabs, which are a go-to get-in tool, especially in neutral. So I think using evasion was a theme of this tournament, and I suspect will be a theme at the Tekken World Tour Finals. And I mean, let's just talk about the classic evasive character of Tekken 7, which is Akuma, right? Demon Flip is evading many things, and down 3 is evading highs all day, every day. Well, I shouldn't say evading, it's crushing highs. So that was a big theme of the tournament. I think the other theme of the tournament, which I think has largely been a result of Arslan's Kunimitsu, has been string, basically using the second hit of the string to interrupt an opponent's response to the first hit of your string. So throwing out strings in neutral can be high risk, right? Because if I throw out a jab, the chance that my opponent can visually see the jab and react with any punish that's kind of big is very small, right? So to fully punish and punish hard jab, you basically need a hard read. And so that makes jabs really safe. So now let's talk about strings, right? Strings in neutral, especially 2-hit or 3-hit strings, if I'm at a distance, and I see that you're whiffing a string, that's a lot more visual, that's a lot more time to visually confirm that you're whiffing and punish, either with a chunky mid attack, or trying to evade the second hit, and so on and so forth. But what's happened is people have looked at strings that have forward momentum or counter hit launching properties, and have basically said, okay, I'm gonna hit my first hit of my string just outside of its range, just outside of its range, so that the second hit of the string will be inside of range. And this has led to an insane mind game of challenging top players' muscle memory, because you're going to see the first hit of the string, and your instinct might be to either backdash and try and get away, or with punish the second hit. But because of this like golden range, or even if you backdash, it will still hit you. And if you try and interrupt, because the first hit just whiffed, then the second hit will interrupt you. And Kunimitsu's 2-2 is a classic example. Taveer's down forward 3-2. Um, Bob's, I don't remember the notation for Bob's move. Um, Almost all of Leo's strings used by Ao Ritchie. Cherry Berry Mango's 2-2. This was a very common theme throughout the tournament, and something that I think most players on paper would say, it's risky or it's not solid. But the point is, if you're in this very specific range where the second hit is guaranteed to hit, unless there's a perfect sidestep, then it's become a super effective technique. And I think was something I'm going to try and implement into my own game. And so to round off the tournament recap, we had Atif winning 3-2 over Low High. It was a pretty great winners final and grand final. Atif showing he's probably one of the hardest people to beat in a long set, because having your character pool be Akuma, Marduk, Leo, which he never went to. I mean, these are just like monster tournament characters. And specifically Marduk and Akuma, you have to change how you're thinking about the matchup so drastically within a tournament set that it really puts a lot of mental burden on your opponent. And I think he maybe even played Bob once or twice. So overall, it was a great event. The next big tournament is, of course, the Tekken World Tour Finals. Once the qualifier details have been figured out, so who made the finals as well as how the LCQ will be played out, are all finalized, we'll revisit that and do a preview. It'll, of course, be in New Orleans in January. So yeah, thank you for listening. A huge shout out to the top 8 of this tournament: Atif Butt, Low High, Ulsan, Taveer, Arslan Ash, Cherry Mango, Pat Lors, and Ao Ritchie, who is super entertaining. Thank you all for listening, and have a great day.